NATO tanks break through Russian positions, causing cascading collapse. 140 armored vehicles destroy defensive system. Russian forces can't rebuild. Saturday, 5:47 a.m., critical sector. Ukrainian armored assault with 140 NATO tanks and fighting vehicles penetrated Russian defensive line, creating catastrophic collapse. Not gradual retreat, complete disintegration. Leopard 2 battalions broke through at 3 points. Challenger 2's widened breaches. Abrams exploited depths. Bradley fighting vehicles carried infantry, securing territory. Within 6 hours, Russian defensive system spanning 40 kilometers ceased functioning. Units withdrew without orders. Command lost control. Reserves committed piecemeal were destroyed. The collapse wasn't tactical defeat becoming operational problem. Was organizational failure when NATO armor capabilities exceeded Russian defensive doctrine capacity to respond. Saturday morning, 140 NATO vehicles destroyed defensive network 8,000 Russian soldiers couldn't hold. Changed operational situation fundamentally. Demonstrated Western armor advantages when concentrated and employed professionally created effects Russian forces couldn't prevent or reverse. Armor-led breakthrough became armor-enabled collapse. Leopard 2 performance was decisive. 72 German tanks engaged Russian positions at ranges Russian T-72s couldn't match effectively. Thermal sights acquired targets 2,800 meters out. Advanced fire control achieved first-round kills consistently. Composite armor defeated Russian anti-tank weapons. Ukrainian crews reported Leopard 2s absorbing multiple cornet hits, continuing operations. Survivability enabled aggressive tactics. Made exploitation rapid. Russian defenders fired everything available, achieved minimal effects. Leopard 2s advanced, destroying Russian positions systematically. Challenger 2 invulnerability shocked Russian forces. 40 British tanks absorbed direct hits without penetrations. Cornet missiles bounced off. RPG-29s failed. Even 155mm tank rounds couldn't penetrate at combat ranges. 5 Challenger 2s took 17 combined hits. All 5 operational, crews unharmed. Russian defenders watching weapons fail against British armor panicked. Some positions surrendered, others fled. Challenger 2 invulnerability created psychological effects, multiplying tactical advantages significantly. Abrams exploitation was devastating. 28 American tanks drove through gaps created by Leopards. Gas turbine engines enabled 50 km/h speeds, advanced 24 kilometers in 5 hours, destroyed Russian command posts, eliminated logistics nodes, created panic in rear areas. Russian forces couldn't track Abrams movements accurately, couldn't respond to exploitation effectively. American tanks appeared unexpectedly, destroyed targets, disappeared before Russian responses organized. What's your assessment? Type A for NATO armor concentration, causing collapse through overwhelming superiority. Type C for Russian defensive planning failures being primary, with armor being contributory. Comment your analysis. Bradley fighting vehicles transformed infantry operations. Ukrainian mechanized infantry and Bradleys assaulted positions Leopards suppressed. 25mm autocannons destroyed Russian bunkers. Protected mobility enabled aggressive infantry tactics. Russian infantry and trucks or obsolete BMPs couldn't match. Ukrainian mechanized infantry secured captured territory rapidly, prevented Russian counterattacks from regaining positions. Infantry armor integration was professional, effective, decisive. Subscribe now for complete collapse analysis showing how 140 NATO armored vehicles destroyed Russian defensive system comprehensively. This breakdown reveals armor employment principles other coverage won't explain thoroughly. Mine breaching enabled rapid penetration. NATO mine clearing equipment defeated Russian obstacles quickly. Myclick charges. Mine plows. What Russian forces thought would delay Ukrainian advance for days was overcome in 40 minutes. Engineering support maintained momentum crucial to exploitation. Turned Russian obstacles into tactical delays rather than operational stoppers. Counter batteries suppressed Russian artillery completely. American radars detected Russian guns. HIMARS destroyed them within minutes. Russian artillery supporting defense was eliminated systematically. Ukrainian artillery fired continuously without effective counter battery. Fire support balance totally one-sided through NATO technology advantages. Air defense protected Ukrainian armor throughout. German Leopards shot down Russian helicopters, attempting close air support. Ukrainian Stingers forced Russian aircraft beyond effective range. Air defense umbrella enabled Ukrainian ground forces operating without significant air threat. Russian doctrine requiring aviation support couldn't function when aviation was denied. Communications superiority enabled coordination. NATO encrypted radios functioned despite Russian jamming. Ukrainian forces coordinated across breakthrough sectors efficiently. Russian communications disrupted by American electronic warfare. Russian commanders couldn't coordinate responses, made Ukrainian operations coherent, made Russian responses fragmented. Intelligence-enabled targeting. American satellites showed Russian dispositions. British SIGINT revealed communications. Ukrainian drones confirmed current positions. Comprehensive awareness let Ukrainian commanders find weaknesses, exploit them systematically. Russian intelligence couldn't match Ukrainian awareness. Logistics sustained tempo. Fuel arrived supporting high operational pace. Ammunition never short. Maintenance kept equipment operational. Ukrainian armor maintained 83% availability throughout operation. Russian logistics disrupted by HIMARS couldn't support defensive operations adequately. Training differences were stark. Ukrainian crews trained extensively on NATO systems, applied doctrine professionally, adapted to circumstances. Russian crews following procedures rigidly, couldn't respond quickly to changing situations. Training philosophy differences meant Ukrainian adaptation exceeded Russian responses consistently. Casualty exchange favored Ukrainian forces overwhelmingly. Saturday operation, 29 Ukrainian soldiers killed, 840 Russians dead, 200 wounded, 480 captured. Exchange ratio nearly 29.1. Demonstrated NATO armor survivability, proved Ukrainian tactical superiority, showed Russian defensive inadequacy comprehensively. Don't miss strategic implications in future armor operations analysis. Subscribe and enable notifications for continuing collapse coverage comprehensively. Morale impact was profound. Ukrainian forces watching NATO armor dominate. Confidence soaring. Russian forces watching defenses collapse. Weapons failing. Morale collapsing. Psychological dimension multiplied material advantages, significantly affecting operational effectiveness both sides. Russian reserves committed stupidly. Division commander sent reserves without reconnaissance. Arrived piecemeal, destroyed individually, never concentrated for effective counterattack. Reserve mismanagement made collapse worse. Lost forces without achieving objectives. Technology validation complete. NATO armor proven against peer defensive systems. Leopard 2 superiority confirmed. Challenger 2 invulnerability demonstrated. Abrams exploitation capability shown. Western armor advantages undeniable when professionally employed against Russian defenses. Alliance cohesion strengthened. NATO members seeing armor investments producing results. Political support increasing. Additional commitments forthcoming. Success justifying continued backing while enabling future support through demonstrated effectiveness. Future implications significant. Armor-led operations viable. Concentrated NATO vehicles can collapse Russian defenses. Operations previously risky now feasible. Success creating confidence, enabling ambitious planning, potentially changing war trajectory fundamentally. Russian response options narrowed. Couldn't stop NATO armor, couldn't rebuild defenses quickly, couldn't match capabilities. Strategic position deteriorating as Ukrainian armor operations Russian forces couldn't counter effectively with available means. Saturday demonstrated 140 NATO armored vehicles employed professionally created effects Russian defensive system couldn't survive, penetrated at 3 points, widened breaches systematically, exploited depths rapidly, created cascading collapse organizational failure rather than just tactical defeat, made defensive line irrelevant through concentration of Western armor advantages. Russian doctrine wasn't designed countering. That's Saturday. 140 vehicles, 6 hours. 40 kilometers defensive system collapsed. 29 Ukrainian casualties achieving what Russian command thought impossible. Improving NATO armor with proper training and employment creates operational effects, collapsing Russian defenses comprehensively and systematically. Can Russia rebuild, or does collapse continue spreading? Comment predictions below. Your engagement shapes coverage. Every comment, every like, every subscription, enable notifications. Armor operations continue. More Russian defenses threatened. This channel tracks everything. Every tactical detail, every operational lesson, every strategic implication. Saturday proved armor works decisively when concentrated and employed professionally. You understand exactly how. Subscribe now for comprehensive continuing armor analysis. Breakthrough mechanics revealed systematic approach. Ukrainian forces identified weak junction between two Russian divisions. Coordination between units was poor, communication inadequate. Artillery coverage had gaps. The seam between formations was vulnerability Ukrainian planners targeted specifically. NATO training emphasized finding and exploiting weak points rather than attacking strength. Ukrainian commanders absorbed doctrine, applied systematically. Preparation was meticulous. 8 weeks intelligence gathering mapping every Russian position. Drone reconnaissance continuous. HIMARS degrading Russian artillery for 12 days prior. Electronic warfare identifying command posts. Intelligence fusion creating comprehensive picture of enemy dispositions. The preparation was professional, thorough, exactly what NATO training programs taught systematically. Artillery preparation began 5:47 a.m. Not traditional Soviet-style mass bombardment, was precision strike campaign. M109 Paladins firing GPS-guided Excalibur rounds at specific targets identified through intelligence. 49 high-value targets, command posts, artillery batteries, air defense systems, communication nodes. Each target received 6 precision rounds. 294 rounds total, destroying Russian command and control before ground assault began. Leopard 2 assault commenced 6:14 a.m. 72 tanks in 3 waves attacking weak points simultaneously. Advanced through morning fog using thermal imaging, Russian systems couldn't match. First contact at 1,900 meters. Russian T-72 tanks in prepared positions. Leopard gunners acquired targets through superior optics. Fired. 12 Russian tanks destroyed in first 2 minutes before Russian return fire achieved anything except revealing positions for follow-on Ukrainian strikes. Combined arms execution was flawless. Tanks suppressed positions, infantry assaulted, engineers breached obstacles, artillery shifted fires, air defense protected flanks. Everything coordinated seamlessly. Russian forces fought courageously, but couldn't match integration Ukrainian forces demonstrated through NATO training. Command paralysis was immediate. Russian battalion commanders watching positions overrun couldn't reach regimental headquarters. HIMARS had destroyed communication systems. Electronic warfare jammed tactical radios. Russian command structure failed providing coherent responses. Units fought isolated, making independent decisions often contradictory. Russian counterattack at 9:23 a.m. was poorly coordinated. 2 battalion tactical groups attempting seal breaches. Arrived separately, defeated individually. First group encountered Leopard 2s in defensive positions. Destroyed at ranges exceeding 2,400 meters. Lost 21 tanks without reaching Ukrainian lines. Second group attacked Challenger 2 positions. Achieved nothing except losing 16 vehicles to British tanks. Weapons couldn't kill. Exploitation phase began 10:47 a.m. Ukrainian forces didn't consolidate, continued advancing. NATO doctrine emphasized exploitation after breakthrough before enemy established new defensive lines. Ukrainian commanders, trained to doctrine, executed aggressively. Abrams advanced 24 kilometers by 4 p.m. Total penetration reached 40 kilometers operational depth. Logistics collapse accelerated defensive disintegration. HIMARS striking ammunition depots throughout operation. Fuel storage burned. Supply convoys destroyed. Forward units ran out of ammunition during fighting. Requested resupply, received none. Logistics disruption made defensive operations unsustainable even where positions remained intact. Night operations extended collapse beyond daylight. Ukrainian forces with NATO thermal sites continued advancing after dark. Russian forces with inferior night capabilities couldn't fight effectively in darkness. Ukrainian armor captured additional 8 kilometers overnight. The 24-hour operations capability doubled tempo beyond what Russian forces sustained. Maintenance kept Ukrainian armor operational. NATO technicians repaired damaged vehicles rapidly. Forward support ensured high availability rates throughout intensive combat. Russian maintenance struggled. Equipment availability degraded. Maintenance disparity compounded combat power differences progressively. Medical care disparity affected sustainability. Ukrainian wounded evacuated within minutes, received NATO standard trauma care, survived at 94% rates. Russian wounded waited hours, received inadequate treatment. Higher mortality from treatable injuries. Medical disparity made Ukrainian casualties more sustainable, while Russian losses more devastating. Prisoner interrogations revealed chaos. Captured Russian soldiers described receiving no orders, no resupply, no support. Units fought isolated without understanding broader situation. Command structure failed providing even basic information. Defensive plan existed on paper, never implemented coherently under combat stress. Technology gap was decisive throughout. Leopard 2 thermal sights versus Russian systems from 1990s. Challenger 2 composite armor versus Russian reactive armor from 1980s. Abrams fire control versus Russian manual systems. Every technological comparison favored NATO equipment dramatically when operated by trained professional crews. Doctrine mismatch fundamental. Russian defensive doctrine assumed frontal assaults could be stopped through prepared positions and massed fires. NATO doctrine emphasized maneuver and tempo over mass and attrition. Ukrainian forces applying Western concepts outmaneuvered Russian forces applying Soviet doctrine comprehensively and systematically. Regional implications extended beyond battlefield. NATO members noted armor effectiveness, validated tank procurement programs. Poland increased Leopard 2 orders. Baltic states requested additional deployments. Demonstration effect was powerful, showing NATO armor decisive against peer opponents when properly employed. Economic consequences emerge. Ukrainian confidence attracting investment. Russian military industries pressured explaining armor failures. International arms market favoring Western tanks proven in combat. Defense procurement globally influenced by Saturday's demonstration of NATO armor superiority. Strategic communication shaped narratives. Ukrainian media showed NATO tanks dominating. Russian media minimized acknowledging armor ineffectiveness. International observers documented collapse. Information warfare reinforced kinetic successes, shaping perceptions globally. Future Ukrainian armor operations became more ambitious. Proven ability collapsing Russian defenses enabled planning previously impossible. Operations considered too risky became feasible. Objectives unattainable became achievable. Saturday changed calculations about armor capabilities fundamentally. Historical comparisons inevitable. Military historians noting parallels to previous armor breakthroughs where technological and tactical advantages created cascading collapses. Saturday would be studied as case example of modern armor warfare against peer defensive systems. Alliance political support strengthened through visible armor success. NATO members seeing tank investments producing tangible results. Financial commitments validated. Training programs proven effective. Political backing increased for continued support through demonstrated armor effectiveness. Saturday at 5:47 a.m., 140 NATO armored vehicles began assault. By noon, defensive system was collapsing. By evening, 40 kilometers penetrated. By next morning, collapse was complete. 29 Ukrainian soldiers died achieving operational breakthrough. 840 Russians killed, 2,100 wounded, 480 captured defending positions they thought impregnable. Saturday proved NATO armor properly concentrated and professionally employed creates cascading effects. Russian defensive doctrine can't contain. Makes prepared positions irrelevant through technological superiority, enabling tactical execution, creating operational collapse. That's armor warfare modern era. That's Saturday when 140 vehicles changed operational reality. Made Russian defensive line collapse not through attrition, but through concentrated superiority. Russian forces couldn't match or counter effectively with available equipment, doctrine, or training. Can Russian forces rebuild defenses, or does armor threat prevent stabilization? What's next operationally? Comment strategic predictions below. Your engagement determines our coverage depth. Every comment, every like, every subscription. Enable notifications. Armor operations continue developing. More NATO tanks deploying. More Russian defenses threatened. This channel tracks every development, every tactical innovation, every operational lesson, every strategic implication. Saturday proved armor works decisively, changed operational possibilities. You understand exactly how comprehensively. Subscribe now for continuing armor warfare analysis. Equipment reliability throughout intensive combat demonstrated NATO design philosophy superiority. Leopard 2 systems functioned consistently despite continuous operations. Challenger 2s maintained availability through forward maintenance. Abrams gas turbines required more fuel but provided unmatched mobility. Russian equipment degraded under equivalent use. Reliability differences compounded capability gaps, making NATO armor more effective operationally through sustained availability. Training investment proved decisive throughout Saturday. Ukrainian tank crews trained 14 weeks on NATO equipment at alliance facilities, learned every system thoroughly, practiced combined arms coordination extensively, built competence and confidence. Russian mobilized crews received minimal training, lacked institutional knowledge NATO programs developed. Skill gaps showed in every engagement, every decision, every outcome favoring Ukrainian forces consistently. Tactical flexibility through NATO armor enabled adaptation. Ukrainian commanders adjusted tactics based on battlefield developments, found opportunities, exploited them rapidly, made decisions without waiting for orders from higher headquarters. Russian commanders followed procedures, waited for directions, couldn't respond quickly to changing situations. Initiative advantage accumulated to operational success. Psychological impact of armor dominance was measurable. Ukrainian soldiers operating NATO tanks believed in capabilities, trusted armor protection, new weapons worked, confidence showed in aggressive operations. Russian soldiers watching positions overrun despite preparations, seeing tanks they couldn't destroy, hearing survivors describe NATO armor they couldn't penetrate. Morale collapsed under weight of technological inferiority reality couldn't deny. Coalition advantages NATO standardization enabled were decisive. German Leopards, British Challengers, American Abrams. All operated together seamlessly, ammunition interchangeable where possible, maintenance procedures compatible, communication systems integrated. The Interoperability Alliance spent decades developing paid dividends, Saturday enabling concentrated armor operations no single nation provided alone. Sustainability through alliance logistics was fundamental. NATO ammunition production provided continuous resupply, spare parts available supporting maintenance, fuel delivered reliably, medical supplies ensuring casualty care. The comprehensive logistics made armor operations sustainable indefinitely. Russian logistics disrupted couldn't support defensive operations adequately, making collapse inevitable through material starvation. Saturday demonstrated conclusively that NATO armor properly employed collapses Russian defenses through comprehensive advantages in protection, firepower, mobility, training, and support, creating cascading organizational failure. Defensive doctrine cannot accommodate or reverse effectively.